Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Torben.
Yeah, okay.
And I thank you very much, Torben, to taking the time to do this interview. Very much
Yeah,
appreciated.
but you're so welcome.
Well,
And how are you? Are you up in Canada?
yes, in Nova Scotia, Canada, and it's very
Yeah.
cold right now.
Ah, it is. Yeah.
Very,
Yes,
very
yes, yes.
cold.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's a nice place. I never really been there, maybe, but I've always heard that it was such a nice place up there.
So, Torben, your music is very interesting, what we've got, and I'm going to be asking you some questions about what you've produced, etc., with this new
Okay.
product. And I hope you have a little bit of time to talk about these questions.
Let's go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Torben Ulrich, I mean, experimental music can be a beautiful thing. Are there
Uh-huh.
times that it just doesn't happen, when there's no inspiration for you?
Yeah, I think we we can never know when it happens or when it doesn't happen. I think uh, in the first place because uh, if if you see it, as an ongoing, continuous process, meaning being sort of, let's say, inside the music or whatever you call that. Some people feel maybe it's not even music or something, but within that field of sounds, if you will, then I think you cannot take a step back and evaluate it in terms of that it was inspired or not. Of course, afterwards you have sort of a feel of how it went or something, but at the same time, I think uh, you're also not necessarily creating criteria for what it means for that to be for the outcome, if you will, to be inspired or not, uh, because I think you want to be maybe, or speaking for myself, that you could say wanting to be in that in between where the result is not the result hasn't happened yet, or that you don't necessarily want to be in a place where it's already evaluated. And in some sense, that's a little bit what I mean. Also, let's say in terms of ball playing or something, if your criteria is if you win the point or not, then that's not really what I'm so interested in. I'm more interested in playing the point and then leave that and sort of go on from there rather than focusing on the result, and so. And so, in some sense, you're if you see what I'm trying to get at, that that I'm not so interested in the categories, let's say, as the in-betweens or the process itself, or setting up some structures that are sort of both continuous and kind of self-breaking or making a rupture into the category making or something. Does that make any sense to you?
Yes,
Maybe not. Yeah.
it's
Okay.
very
Okay.
interesting, the points of views, when you look at it like that. Yes, very interesting.
So that's what I mean. That let's say you're referring to when we played there with Lars for with that certainly was. I mean, the circumstances I thought were interesting, and then I thought we had sort of a precious moment, if you will, and then later on it can be evaluated or whatever you call that, and then some people say that was a lot of shit or just a lot of noise or nobody really coming together or something. But at the same time, we tried it, and then that was what it was. And you asked, I think, in one of those questions whether whether that was a sort of a precious moment, and it was, but it was also a kind of a, let's say, for you to understand that, let's say we, meaning our group there, was playing with a drummer that I've known for a long, long time, and his name was Klaus Boye, and when Lars grew up, and when he was little, and that's, let's say, 45 years ago or more, when he was 3 or 4 years old, then Lars said, when I grow up, I want to be an ice hockey player and a drummer like Klaus Boye, And so all of a sudden, we had this idea, maybe Lars would join us, and then we would have these two drummers. But the relationship between them was the kind of the interesting thing here, if you will. Of course, you could say also, let's say, from a more sort of public point of view, and Lars and Metallica and all of that, it was sort of Lars is playing with his father there for the first time, so it had that kind of thing also. But from a kind of more internal thing, they were sort of a little bit like this, Lars playing with that sort of an old icon or whatever you call that, So, I mean, just to give you an example, so in some sense to us it was whether it had some kind of enormous musical value or something, that's a different thing, or something almost to the fact itself that we played, that we did it, or something. Do you follow that a little bit in terms of what you ask about the inspiration, Or,
absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure Lars as well, respected this very much himself, in
that sense that he was willing to do it, because of course, in some sense, he was the one that had to step outside of his sheltered field, if you will, and on the other hand, he is also grown up, if you will, Jason, with hearing a lot of sort of free forms of music and stuff like that. So and also we made together a film. I don't know if you've ever seen that or heard about it, but where he made the soundtrack for a film that we made. I don't know if it's 10 or 15 years, 10 years ago or 12 or something, and where I thought he played very well. Where he was alone and just watching the film, the video track of it, and then he was blending with the acoustical aspects of the audio, and in some sense I thought that's some of the more interesting things that I've heard from him, So in some sense I was thinking, yeah, he can do that if he wants to, or something,
And do you recall the name of film, or what film that was called?
It's called Before the Wall or something, but Molly, I think, can send you some details if you. We played it, actually. He and I showed it at a Metallica festival. I think it could be 3 years ago in Atlantic City or something. Okay. And I don't know if it's sort of available on these different places, but I'm sure that Molly can guide you there or something. And also if you need some other help. I was just wondering, since I had seen your last question, then I don't know if you received from Molly a little bit of a sort of a long liner notes of 24 pages or
yes,
something.
Yes, I did read that. Yeah.
And then a downloadability, at least for that kind of thing, because that would be that was our third work together with Søren Kjærgaard that you mentioned also. In the first one was called something with suddenly sound or something. And then there was a second one called whatever that was called, and then there was this third one. So I mean, if are you familiar with those or?
I'm researching it as we're going.
Yeah, good.
And
Yeah,
of course I've received the download. I checked that
yeah.
out, and I'll be looking at it more in these coming days as well.
Okay, and also if you needed to, I mean, let's say if you felt that you wanted to understand that again, we can also talk again. If you feel like it. I mean, it's just sort of like, I mean, I want to accommodate you to the best I can, without also not necessarily asking you to listen to all this stuff. That's not what I'm asking. but it was more like if you said where can I hear at least a minute or something. But my point here, I think, to mention it is that music is of course in some sense kind of different from that first one, if you were referring to that suddenly sound, where it was just Søren on the piano and I on sort of different sounds and the two of us. And here we had sort of also a string quartet where he had composed some more formal things, and I was also reshuffling some more formal texts from some philosophers and Chinese Taoists and stuff like that. So so that's what that project was about. The most recent one here, that one called Meridana.
Yes, and the Suddenly Sound was discovered on YouTube. That's where I would have seen it.
Yeah.
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 Very interesting feel that you guys deliver on that. So let's
Yeah.
move along here for another question, Torben.
Please, Jason.
So what would be your thoughts on this style while performing, front of an audience? Like when you arrive in front of the audience, how does it feel to you when you arrive there, and play?
I feel that the audience is very much part of it, in other words, when we play that kind of music in that kind of place where we are, those are, then you could say the place and the people there are very important. What I mean is that, let's say, if you have, let's say, a heavy metal group playing in a sort of large anonymous stadium, if you will, then they bring a set list, and then they can bring a set list, and then the next day it's basically the same set list, but maybe rotated, you will, right? That so that number 6 becomes number 4, number 16 becomes number whatever. You follow what I mean?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And so here, I think when we play this kind of stuff, in the first place, you play into, since it's so sound oriented, let's say in terms of the sound, the suddenly sound, where you'd say also that you go for you sort of what is the sound of that moment, where let's say your initial moment, right? You come in to some place, it's in some sense you're not prepared. On the other hand, you're prepared in the sense that it's Friday night at 8:00 or something. So from that point of view, it's not completely improvised, but you have a commitment to show up, and then let's say you do, and then what is the architecture of the room from the point of view of the sound and the vibe and the people, and most of the time we try to keep it very small,
Mm-hmm.
so that there's a kind of an intimacy both with the acoustics of the room and with the people. And when I say that, it's also, let's say, again, going back to, let's say a Metallica thing where, let's say, Lars was playing with us there, and a lot of media people, a lot of photographers wanted to show up, and it was sold out very quickly and all of that. And of course, we could say, oh yeah, but there could be a lot more people. But we wanted to make it very, very small and very intimate, and also not to have, 35 clicking cameras going on all the time. So
right.
we had to keep it in that sense also acoustically, not interfering with the clicking and the noises of all of that. So what I mean is that there has to be, for us, I think, to make that kind of music, a certain intimacy, and so we don't want to play any place necessarily, but rather something where we, let's say, know a little bit about maybe a little bit about the acoustics and the sort of the what can be done in that kind of room or something. It doesn't mean that otherwise we wouldn't play at all or something, but I just mean that, that you play into that kind of situation, and all of a sudden, if it's changed and the acoustics are awful or something, then of course you try to play into that or deal with that or something, But what I mean is, acoustics are very important, and the sort of the vibe of the room, and then also the sort of the vibe with the people, and also try to explain what it is that we're doing, if we're doing something a little bit complicated, or asking questions if people have any questions. And, sometimes, Jason, people cannot quite understand if you say, but you must bring something, you must have, is there not, have you prepared something or something? But of course, as we come, we come with a certain capability or with a certain vision or something like that. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean we necessarily bring a song or a set of chords or a kind of a melodic structure or, that kind of thing.
That's very well, taught, the way you said that. Very, very well. Very intelligent speaking you're doing, Torben, actually.
Oh, come on.
It's very good. When did you discover the taste, for avant-garde music and, free forms of jazz and this style?
I think I was interested that almost, I would say, almost as long as I can remember, I started out specifically, let's say, being very interested in New Orleans music, and in terms of that kind of jazz music and blues that they were doing in New Orleans let's say in the 1920s, and and so in the 1940s, when I grew up, let's say, or thereabouts, let's say if I was born in 28, then I was, in 1948 I was 20, but so I was already interested in all of that. But at the same time, I think I was also interested in, if at that time there was a sort of a, what can I call it, a kind of some sort of struggle, if you will, or something between, people that adhered to kind of New Orleans music, and then those that were going for bebop, and all the innovations of the early 1940s, in terms of jazz music. But I was interested in both the bebop and the old jazz, but whereas I was playing more of the old jazz, I was still listening a lot to that. But then at the same time, I was listening to what is known as classical music, and I was listening to African music and Indian music. So all of that came very, very early in my case, and I had some good mentors all through the 40s that sort of could guide me also in terms of all these music. But it didn't really maybe take off until 1945, 46, after the war, when things opened up and borders opened up and many things opened up, and it was a very exciting time for all of us growing up and becoming sort of age in those years, So I felt very early that I was very sort of interested in the whole field, if you will, and then later on as a ball player, I could travel to India, I could travel to Africa, I could travel to the United States, I could travel to Canada and hear all these different strains of music, and so for me there was never this sort of trying to sort of fit into a kind of a category or necessarily wanting to be part of just this little field in terms of a certain narrow identity or something,
And I'm sure Lars as well was brought up in this big, vast,
Well, he heard, yeah, but I mean, at least he heard a lot, like that. But of course, he was pretty early on. You could say he was sort of, you could say, focusing in on let's say, whatever all of that was in a sort of narrow sense of Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden and then let's say maybe Jimi Hendrix and that kind of and the guitars and the drummers in that whole field. It doesn't mean that we couldn't share things, and we would go to also share blues people that were coming to Denmark in those years, and I had when we were playing in our band there before Lars was born. I'm talking about the early 1950s, and Lars was born in '63. Then already I had some good contacts with blues people that were also playing with our band in those days in Denmark, So in that sense, his roots were also already people that I had played with. I mean, if we talk about, let's say the black Chicago people that were inspiration also for the Stones and maybe and all those things, and so all of that, but just so that that we were sort of listening to all of that, and certainly that was part of our education also. And then we had the good fortune to have all these people, coming over to Denmark also in those days. I don't know if they also came to Canada, I think, to a degree, and yeah.
Very good way to get good education in music and study all fields of music.
Exactly. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And it's very important. Now, when I ask you a question like, what do you feel the future of music will be like, in decades and 100 years from now? Is it going to always get to a new evolution, or where are we going to be with music in the future? In the whole spectrum of music.
Oh, I think that, if we're talking about the whole spectrum, I think there would be, let's say, if we're a little bit in a kind of could we call it a little bit like I don't know if it's fair, to say a little bit like a doldrum, but you could say that in some sense I feel that, what the Stones and the Beatles, and then after that, what let's say that post that time, meaning also then let's say the heavy metal people of what came after the Stones and Beatles and what have you, then let's say the Cream and all of that stuff. What came after them, I think, unfolded in a certain way, and let's say, Metallica have had their sort of 30-year anniversary, right? And the Stones are still with us, but they have also been around for 50 years and more. And likewise, if you take in the field of jazz music, in a very strictest sense, post Ornette Coleman, post Cecil Taylor, and post some of those things, there's a little bit of things that have really sort of exploded into something sort of like post bebop also, and so you see what I'm saying a little bit, and the instrumentation, and post John Coltrane and post Sonny Rollins. It hasn't really. It doesn't mean that there are not many wonderful players and gifted people and stuff, but it's a little bit like I feel a little bit like that. And you go to the classical field and you go post John Cage and post Morton Feldman and all of that. It hasn't really sort of exploded into something new that is sort of either very exciting or very obviously something of a different kind of metal, or or something happened a little bit like you felt when bebop happened. Really, something was coming together, coalescing into something, And in that sense, a little bit like what happened when Arnold Schoenberg and Webern and those people in the classical field, when all of a sudden something really happened, and they in turn were inspiring, a painter like Kandinsky and some of those people. And so all of a sudden, there was new things happening in painting, and with Cubism and what Kandinsky and his folks were doing, and all of that. So there's all of a sudden there's a kind of an explosion, and then there's also people like Marcel Duchamp or something. So something is happening that also turns that into a kind of a rupturing of itself or something. So what I mean is that up through the last 100 years have been some very big sort of kind of boom manifestations of stuff, of a different, different. It sounded like a different thing or something, But if that's not happening right now, I feel that if we give it 100 years, then sooner or later something will happen, that would excite us all afresh, I probably won't be around to hear that, but I hope you do.
That'd be great. And it always goes in a loop. It
might
go back to the beginning.
It sure does. Absolutely, Jason.
Go back to the beginning.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, Torben, going, to a genealogical point of view, your parents and grandparents were the musicians and athletes themselves?
I would say maybe not very much. No, my parents were sort of, I would say mostly sort of physically oriented, so I very early had all this ball playing stuff, and my father played at Wimbledon, when in the year I was born, let's say, and he was playing Davis Cup with, for Denmark, I don't know if you know what Davis Cup is, but it's a sort of national team event. Canada, in these days, let's say, yesterday had a team event that was called the Hockman Cup in Perth, Australia, where Canada beat the United States. So there are these team events that have been running for 100 years or so. Does that ring a bell for you?
In a sense, when you watch it, yeah.
Yeah, and so both in terms of individuality, my father was then, let's say, played all these tournaments and all of that stuff, and likewise, then I took that up and came also and played in Canada, from I think the early 50s and onwards, and so I was very much schooled in all of that stuff. But at the same time, I was very interested in music and painting and philosophy, and so I was sort of hanging with a lot of people outside the ball playing realm, but of course I would say that, let's say, my grandmother on my father's side, she was very interested in the theater and would take me also to the theater, and I was listening to music with her, and stuff. So I had some of that stuff pretty early, but not necessarily in that way that music was a large part. Specific musics were part of their lives. My mother could play a little piano, and so it wasn't like it was completely foreign, but still,
At least it showed you a little taste of music and sports.
Yes.
In that sense, which is, good to know, because when you look into who the people are, it's sometimes good to see who the parents are and the grandparents.
No, you're so right, Jason. Absolutely. You are molded by all of that, and how you grow up and all of that. And in some sense, I appreciated what that kind of setting. I was very free to roam around, and so I played soccer, I played table tennis, I played what is known in Europe as handball. Do you play handball up in Nova Scotia?
No, it's not
no,
too popular.
Yeah, it's a kind of a European game. And then I was playing some skating, and speed skating, and so I was doing a lot of physicalities there. Let's say when I was 10, 12, 11, 12, 13, 14. But then I also began to play some music when I was 14 and 15, and then that really took off also. But so I tried to have sort of a kind of at least a double or a multiple track, or as it turned out, sort of many tracks, because I was interested in doing some paintings, and so I've done some of that, and so I've been, as you can tell from all this, I'm sort of interested in the whole field of things,
And like that, did you go to university in your days?
Yeah, I went for a while, I wanted to be a doctor, and I was particularly interested in psychiatry, and stuff like that. But I could quickly see that it was very I could maybe combine the music with the traveling, a lot, but it was very difficult for me to combine the studies of psychiatry and chemistry and all of that, and be away from the classes and all of that, when I was constantly, almost in those days, let's say in the mid 40s and the early 50s, that it was difficult to be constantly on the road, and I was. So in some sense, sadly, I gave that up, but I continued to be interested in also psychoanalysis and Freudian things, and also there was a guy called Wilhelm Reich, that was also doing some stuff, post-Freudian things, and then a French psychoanalyst called Lacan that I was also interested in. So in that sense, I kept that interest alive, I would say, and I'm certainly also hopefully in terms of healing, that both in terms that we have medicine that can heal us all, since we are badly in need of healing, I think. You saw today what happened in Paris.
Yes, I did.
And it just goes on and on and on. So I think in terms of healing, how music can be also a healing factor, a healing process, a healing element. So likewise, I think that we have so much healing to do everywhere,
And Torben, are you very educated in different languages as well? Because, from all the touring you ever did.
Yeah, well, when you're sort of from a small country like Denmark, then you quickly, you can speak some French, you can speak some German, you can speak some, first of all, English, of course, but that was what we first learned, also seeing films and all of that. So English was first, then German and French, and then I started, when I went to, the later phases of school, I also studied Latin, and then when I was interested in Greek philosophy, I could study a little Greek also, but that's much, but I just mean enough so that one can sort of scoot around a little bit in the terminologies and stuff,
And when you were young, how hard was it to discover new music? Was it very rare to get music? Would you have the music for a long time? The same music?
No, I would think that as soon, I would say, Jason, as soon as it opened up in, at least, in the first place, I went to school in Sweden, and had some very sort of fortunate schooling up in Sweden in let's say 44 and 45. So I heard a lot of music there. That was where Sweden was still open to music because they were neutral during that war, and so there was still some traffic both with music and other things. But then coming back to Denmark there in 45, then pretty quickly things opened up in a very intense way, if with all these things making sort of a barrage of new things to look into, and all these new musics and what was happening, in so many fields, and so to me, like, it was not for lack of resources, if you will, and then trying to go to all these different sources and check them out and see what you could learn, and you were maybe either bewildered or a little confused, or in terms of this barrage of things that were coming at you after a kind of those pretty dark years of the Second World War, and so being coming of age at that time, I feel it was very, very exciting, and it was, the literature was coming at you quickly, and I knew where to find some exciting writings that came out of Paris, or a Henry Miller coming out of United States, but still, not being allowed to be printed in the United States. So you could go to Shakespeare and Company and some of those places that I could visit, being a ball player. So I could go and visit with all these, in those places where some of these things were available, Jason. So I should not complain that it wasn't quickly available to me.
Where can someone find like your works now, like Meridana, Lines Towards a Non-Local Alchemy, that album?
Yeah, I mean, what we did with that, just to give you an idea, and why Molly, I think, sent it to you like that. And it's not, let's say that the one that you talked about and the following one, those were CDs, and I can ask Molly to send you the information there. What we were doing with this Meridana thing, which was the third album that he and I did together, and as I said, we had this string quartet involved also. There what we tried to do also to add some fresh, let's say, visuality to it, so that what you see, what you saw that Molly sent you a link to some liner notes.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, and then they were let's say embedded or enfolded in this double album. It's a double vinyl album, okay. and we wanted to make it vinyl these days because we feel that a lot of people that are interested in that kind of music, they don't necessarily, they're not so happy with a kind of a cheap version of a digital CD, so they prefer the vinyl because the groove gives them an analog version that's a little bit stronger in terms of the sound,
The sonic waves of it.
Yeah, exactly. And so, And so what we wanted to do also with the album itself was that we wanted to incorporate some of these ideas that you can read about in the liner notes about meridians as lines, virtual lines, but also as meridians, in terms of, I don't know if you're familiar with, in acupuncture and Chinese medicine, they have some internal meridians that run through our bodies, and that, that when you have sort of acupuncture, then you're sort of getting these punctures where you're approaching these inner lines. And so you had sort of outer lines circling the globe, if you will, of the outer meridians, and then the internal meridians of our internal bodies. And so it's a kind of an interplay between those two set of lines. And so we wanted to see if we could depict that. So we wanted to do every album would be a unique cover. In other words, it wouldn't be printed.
Okay.
So Molly and I at the moment, we have sort of one album, so it's not like we can send you one. We have one album, and we brought back from Denmark one for life, so but if you go online or go with Molly can help you, you can see what it looks like, a little bit like some lines, as we understand, as meridians, and some circles that are also the circular lines of the meridians around the globe. And so we try to with some long things, so we made a sort of a performative thing out of making these 300 albums live, so that every album is different. And so in that sense, that they, but at the same time, we threw these lines across, with some thin boards, or I don't know what you call them in Canadian, some sort of big pieces of long lines of wood, you know, that we almost like branches or something that were cut, you know, something, and then we put ink on them and threw them across so that we made these lines so that they were both connecting the albums to each other, but also when you disconnected them, then each album was its own cat or its own little piece of work or something. And so that was sort of the what we thought was kind of nice, and it took us, of course, I mean, you know, maybe altogether in terms of days, it probably took us more than a week to make them, you know.
Very original.
So just to give you sort of an idea of how that was different. But I can ask Molly, since you have a good connection with her, I think she can guide you maybe where I think maybe on my website or something that she has put up the some of that stuff, just so you can get an understanding of what that is.
Excellent stuff. I shall be communicating with Molly and asking her some questions. And
yes, but don't hesitate to do it. I think she said to me also that you should know that if she could help you in some way, she would be glad to do that.
Oh, well, that's awfully nice of you guys. I really appreciate you guys taking the time for this.
Yeah, Jason, but I wish you all the best up there, and I hope in some sense that you'll have some nice days with the snow and you're not sort of snowed in or something. But I know that you guys are running through some very white days up there with a lot of stuff. And Lars and them, they're just coming in also from you know, a part of the world where there was a lot of snow, you know, and they're just coming in today, and they've been skiing. So I know everywhere in the east there's been a lot. We have sort of pretty nice sort of mild day here on the west coast. So, but we wish you all the best, Jason, and good luck also with your work and all the stuff you're doing. Okay.
Thank you very much, Torben.
Yeah.
And thank you for making me a better student of all arts of music. Really appreciate that.
Come on. It was nice. Thanks for being such a good listener there.
You're very welcome. I really appreciate your intelligence in this, and I really mean it. You speak very well.
Thank you, Jason. But all the best, and let's be in touch. Either if I can help you some more, or Molly can help you sufficiently, that's fine too. And we can be in touch sort of long distance, you know.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that, my friend.
Yeah. But all the best in the meantime.
Okay, well, we talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye, Jason.
All right. Talk to you soon, my friend.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.